All right, so the recording is on now. So the first question that I have is, what made you choose your major? Feel free to unmic yourselves, whatever order you want to talk in.
I'll go first actually, because I don't know about Professor Song and Professor Falcioni, but for myself, political science is not or was not my first choice as a major. In fact, it was nowhere near where I left high school. So originally, I majored in astrophysics. And so it was obviously the opposite spectrum on the math, hard sciences versus poli-sci in the social sciences. And it has a lot to do with my family upbringing. My parents were traditional Chinese conservative parents, and I either had to do something that involved math, science, or be a doctor. And so my father himself, he was a civil engineer in Hong Kong, and when he immigrated to the United States, he found it difficult to get a job in civil engineering because he lacked the language skills, and instead he opened up a Chinese restaurant. He did not invent orange chicken, so of course that's why we were never rich. But he always wanted me to be a civil engineer as well. I instead was fairly, I was fairly good in math and science. Good. They were happy about that. But I gravitated towards astronomy, and so of course I graduated, went to university and majored in astrophysics, and by the end of my first year I was on academic probation, and by the end of the second year I was dismissed from the university. And so the following summer and the fall semester I was just kind of trying to find my way around. I was completely lost in life. Up until that point, academics had been fairly easy for me. I graduated third in my high school, and then I went to university where everybody else graduated third or better. And now I was thoroughly lost. So it so happened that I took a night class at UCLA Extension, taught by a history professor who was also the director of the counseling department at UCLA at the time. And so I took that class, I did well in it. And then of course, when I found out that she was also the director of counseling, I started asking her about what my options are with regards to reentry into UCLA. And so she told me the outlines of a readmission program, I think is the official term. And then she asked me what I wanted to major in. And I said, well, my major is astrophysics. She said it didn't work well the first time. And so of course I got back, I fulfilled my contract, and I got back into UCLA first. And then I had a really long counseling meeting with her, and she looked over. Prior to me getting dismissed from the university, I had taken some, history classes and poli-sci classes, and I did very well in them. And she asked why didn't I consider majoring in history or political science. And it just never was on my radar because, partly because of my family background and parental pressure, cultural pressure, and what have you. But it made complete sense to me, so I changed my major to political science, and the rest is history. And that's how I chose my major. In essence, it was always there. I was always very opinionated, and I enjoyed debating and being a butthead to my teachers in high school and so forth. But it wasn't until I failed and met with a counselor that I realized where I should be. I'll leave it at that.
If you don't mind, Ryan, I can piggyback off of Pac, mostly because we have actually relatively similar journeys. I didn't know you were an Asian failure like I was, so it's good to know that I'm in good company. So similar to Pac, I also had very strict, very narrow-minded Asian parents where like the only option was to either be a doctor or a lawyer, neither of which sounded interesting to me. I was pre-law briefly, but then I actually like interned at a law firm, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do. So that was that. I also failed my first semester of community college. I ended up with a 1.3 GPA, which I'm very proud of because it's very difficult to fail that miserably. The only reason my GPA wasn't like a 0.0 was because I had a sociology professor named Jackie Troop, who I got an A in her class, and I was shocked because I didn't think I was going to do well at all, but she saw something in me. And after my first semester, she pulled me into her office and she's like, who are you? What do you want to do with your life? What do you like? What do you want to major in? I'm like, I don't know. I hate school. It's not for me. I want to be a fashion designer. This is the last thing I want to be doing. And she said, you're clearly smart and you're clearly capable. Like, you are not bad at school. You just need to apply yourself. So I stuck with it. I actually like pulled my GPA to 4.0 after that. But unfortunately, no matter how many A's you get, like it doesn't erase that crappy GPA that you start with. So I was able to graduate well, but not as well as I could have been, which is still one of my biggest regrets. Ended up transferring to UC Irvine, continued to major in sociology, and then I just kind of stuck with it. And it's something I absolutely love because I love studying people and I love studying trends and I love understanding what's going on in the world from a sociological perspective. And I also love teaching and talking to students and writing and researching. So it's kind of this place that I've just fallen luckily into to the fact of one professor who I still keep in touch with. And I'm getting teary-eyed, so I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Ryan.
All right, so yeah, this is great. I don't think I knew either of your backstories a whole lot, so this is like enlightening for me just to connect with you all. And mine's not that dissimilar either. So I didn't finish high school. I stopped going into my sophomore year and didn't, again, really know what I wanted to do. Started taking classes at Chaffey. So Chaffey's, my sort of origin story. And the only thing I thought I should do would be go into medicine or something in the sciences. So I didn't ever declare a major. And back then you didn't have to do GETC and then transfer to UC, which was my plan. But yeah, I was going to be a medical doctor by definitely a lot of family pressure. I can relate to that. But yeah, at some point, through a few classes at Chaffey. So I had a Soc professor, I had a neurological psych professor, and an anthro professor, and a couple of philosophy classes. I realized I liked the social sciences, humanities. I enjoyed writing, which I found out, I guess, during that period. And I guess, yeah, much to my parents' probably disappointment, I transferred in the social sciences. So I did a degree mostly through the sociology department, but it was applied social sciences. So it was sociology, anthropology, psychology. At UCR, finished that, and then kind of jump ship into philosophy. So I kind of have that second level of changing course. And that was just as I was applying to graduate programs at that point in anthropology. One of my instructors said, hey, it seems like you have a lot of these more theoretical questions and questions about first principles and all this sort of stuff that those a lot of those are philosophy questions. So anyway, took a couple of philosophy classes and changed again in grad school. But yeah, I think what we're all maybe on the same page with is, finding your way. And we'll all have pressures, both internally imposed, externally imposed, family, even, others, maybe professors. But yeah, you'll chart your own course. And I think be open to that. And I think, at least for me, if I had kept in the sciences, I don't think I would be happy, as happy. I mean, maybe I could have done it. Like I said, I got decent grades, but I wasn't as interested in that material. And again, and no slight on the sciences. I mean, some of you go the other way. I have many students that are in philosophy that go into the sciences, and I respect that too. I think just be true to yourself and your interests and let them cultivate while you're at, especially at Chaffey. It's a great place to again, chart your course, figure out what you really enjoy, look at career fields, which I guess we'll talk about next. But yeah, that's it. I'll cut myself off.
My next question is, what are some influential classes that you've taken both within your major and outside your major?
Want to do the same order, or are we mixing it up here?
How about we mix it up?
All right, I'll go really quickly. Yeah, so I already mentioned that, so that's why I can hopefully do really quickly. But I took a social psych class and a neuropsych class that just, I think, blew my mind. And then a anthropology course, and it was on just like ritual and stuff, but it in terms of expanding my mind and thinking about the nature of religion, and that's still one of my areas that really had an impact on me. And I think there's that class that really caused me to start applying to grad programs in anthropology. several Soc classes, but it's interesting. There are many other classes I wish I could plug because I mean, a couple phenomenal English classes at Chafee and some Poli-Sci classes. So I feel like, but what I noticed is almost all the classes that I think connected or resonated with me were in the social sciences and humanities. And again, I didn't know that going in. I really thought I was this math kid, math and science kid, and just realized I enjoyed learning about people's worlds and lives. And even now I think of myself as a social scientist, right? I'm in philosophy, but I really do anthropology and sociology of religion and culture and ethics. So anyway.
Julie, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. So that first sociology class I ever took was Intro to Soc, and I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know anything about sociology, and that was similar to Ryan's experience where it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh, there's like different ways to look at the world, and that was really shocking. And then obviously there were all other classes in other disciplines as well, like English courses. But I think one of the most transformative classes for me as an upper division student at UCI was African-American protests. And I still talk to my students about this class because it was just so powerful to see how collective action can create social change. And we still see this today, right? I mean, we're still seeing it in action with the Me Too movements and Black Lives Matter movements. So I think that was just really transformative because I realized that people can create change. And I think that's what fueled my passion for sociology.
All right. And well, for me, I think looking at where I am in life today with my career and my professional discipline, I think it goes back to my high school government teacher. And at the time, we shared differing opinions or philosophies of reality and governance and things like that. And I remember very clearly to this day, I hope I could say this. I guess this is recorded, so I'll find out later on if I could say this or not. But Mr. O'Neill, he said that one day, Pac, you're going to grow up and you won't be an asshole anymore. And and so, of course, true to form, actually, today, my political views and philosophy are very much in line with Mr. O'Neill back when I was in high school. And so it's just a give and take about social justice, I guess. So with him, it was about the issues of civil liberties and civil rights. And then, of course, when I took classes in college and university, the most influential ones were really about world history, world civilization classes, and the struggle of the history of the world, at least from my perspective, is dominated with conflict, right? And you've got conquest by empires, and you got the little guys getting crushed, or maybe not, right? And so I became a fan of the underdog, and then of course, when I took classes in political philosophy, issues of freedom of expression, due process of law, those things start to resonate in my mind, and the importance of it. And then, of course, I eventually got interested in international relations. My father himself was very much interested in East Asian politics and the politics of China and the United States. And so what I realized was that while we talk about the democratic principles and civil liberties protections and the Constitution and things like that, that's only possible if there's an institution that kind of guarantees and enforces and protects them. And what I realized when I took my first international relations class is that there is no such thing like that in the global sense. And so, of course, I gravitated towards that, and the rest is history. But really, it's about political philosophy and history classes that dealt with the underdogs trying to fight for rights, just basically even the right to survival.
Okay, so excellent. My next question is, what was an obstacle that you faced in college and how did you overcome it?
I'll go first. I think my biggest obstacle was myself. And I know that sounds so cliche, but I think just not having the belief that I was actually capable of being good at school. I think that was like a big part for me. And I think having just like that tiny word of encouragement from my social professor really just put me in shape. And I'm like, oh, I just need to try harder. Because I think when I was younger, I was really immature where I thought like, okay, well, I'm not good at this. I'm just going to like give up completely, rather than have that grit and tenacity to kind of like work at something until I actually figured it out and got better at it. So hopefully this isn't your experience, and I hope all of you are way more mature than I was at that age, and realize like you just need to work harder and it'll be okay. So that's all.
Yeah, I'll piggy off of that, Julie, about maturity and maturation, and I think that comes from failure. To be honest, I don't think. I mean, because I was so successful, K through 12, or I should say, 9 through 12 in high school, and I just thought, well, I mean, lack of a better term, I thought I was hot shit, right? I went to university and I thought, wow, this is it. It's going to be easy. The next 4 years will be as easy as the last 4 years, and then I move on into a career, MBA and then BMW, right? And it's actually the failure. It was so stark. It was hitting the brick wall, or the brick wall hitting me. I'm not sure, but I didn't survive, but the wall did. And it was that experience that to me really is the realization that I myself was, my own obstacle and barrier. So I don't think that's a cliche and at all. At least I don't think it is for me. But so the maturity comes from the bouncing back after you've fallen. So I mean, up until that point, I didn't realize that I could ask for help. And my parents emphasized, this cultural or traditional, at least, or the familial culture of self-reliance, right? If you can't do it yourself, right, then you're no good. And so I was literally adrift in academia, and until I found, right, this counselor, just chance meeting, I took her class. And then it became okay to not know what to do. It became okay for me to be lost, and then of course it became okay for me to ask for help. And once those things went from taboo and you shouldn't be in a position that you would need help or need to ask questions, then of course all the opportunities became available and doors started opening for me. But I think that was my greatest obstacle. Was I struggled academically, and initially I didn't know how to fix it. And so I would always encourage all the students out there, and my students in my classrooms, to make use of the resources that Chaffey and whichever university you transfer to. The resources are there. They've been paid for partly by your fees and by taxpayers, but they are definitely there. And make use of it. And the fact that you have to use resources does not make you any less of a scholar or a student. But they're there for the sole purpose of making you the best, student and scholar, and the best graduate possible. And but I also did struggle with money, and for a very brief moment, I experienced food insecurity and housing insecurity. I had to work multiple jobs, but at the end of the day, it was, it's just, being able to ask for help and look out for the resources that were available. They're there, but they're not going to help you unless you reach out and ask for that help. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so I guess I'm piggybacking on the piggybacking, and I think I share most of both of your concerns and obstacles in a very real way. Oh, real quick though, I do want to plug the philosophy classes I had at Chaffey. I realized I didn't even mention those in my influential classes, but they're the ones that sort of drove me back to philosophy. So Dr. Maura O'Neill, Professor Gary Aruz, were phenomenal instructors. And anyway, but in terms of obstacles, yeah, I think most of the things Pac said really resonated with me. And the first one I was going to talk about is just finances. I didn't have much, really any support from family. And I, started working at 16, like probably most of you, and was always struggling to, even paying for Chaffey was a little hectic. And then you went to UCR. It was only maybe $1,300 a quarter, but for me, that was, I remember each quarter just trying to make it work. And I didn't at that point want to take out loans. And in some ways, maybe I wish I was more comfortable taking out loans. And it kind of comes back to Pac's point about getting help, asking for help. I think I was just very self-sufficient, and I moved out on my own and wanted to, work and go to school, but that was really tough. And so I didn't get a lot of help from the institution either, and realized later that was there in terms of educational support, economic support. But I sort of figured out a scholarship system, but I realized, I think I tried to do too much on my own, and, and struggled. Yeah, like Pac was saying, I mean, there were, definitely many months where I wasn't making all my bills. And I wish I had sought out more help, even just institutional help and outside aid. And towards the end of my undergrad, I think I figured out the scholarship system a bit better. And then I started applying for everything. And, you get $100 here, $500 there. But at the time, that ended up paying for the last couple quarters of my undergrad. And then for grad school, I realized, wow, you can usually get grad school paid for if know how to apply, where to apply. And so, I still had to do some loans at some point, but I wish I had been more aware and had even sought out advice from, faculty that I did know and was close with. And then of course, everything from financial aid to writing center and success center stuff. And so I was going to kind of champion that in the way that Pac did. But for me, it was just a lesson learned too late. I mean, I really didn't start using that stuff till the end of my senior year, and wish that I had from Chafee on really sought out, economic support and academic support earlier on. And so, if I'm saying it's an obstacle, I think it's my own obstacle, either stubbornness or a sense, pressure, maybe, as Pac was saying, the self-sufficiency. I just had to do it, pull myself up by my bootstraps, and realize that, that works in some ways, but the help is there. And when you need it, take it. And even if you don't think you need it, maybe seek it out, So I always tell my students, even if you've gotten A's in all your papers, go to the writing center. Just having another set of eyes on a paper can help. Even if you're doing okay economically, do your FAFSA, do your financial aid, just see what's out there. So I think that's all I'll say for now, but it's cool that I think we all overlap quite a bit in both our interests and our obstacles. So.
Right. My next question is, can you describe your participation in any internships, jobs, or field work that were relevant to your major?
I'll go ahead and start us off on this question. I actually, the road signs to a need to change majors actually was there. The evidence was there, and I just I saw the sign for the off ramp, and I just kept on going. So at the end of so the UCLA is on the quarter system, and in the third quarter, I had landed an internship with an astronomy professor. And so his specialization was on radiation bursts of pulsars and supernovae remnants or something like that. And he had spent, I think he'd just come back from a sabbatical in which he was using the telescopes or some type of data collection system in Chile. And so he had all this data, and my job as an intern was to run his data sets through a computer simulation. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday nights, I was there in the computer lab from I think 6:30 to 8:30. And all I did was I sat in front of, this was the early 90s, okay? So it's very slow, everything is. And so I remember just inputting data sets and then just waiting for it to process, and then it comes out. And then I put in another set of data and it would come out. And what struck me was that in this whole computer lab that the astronomy and the physics department shared, there were a lot of people in there every night, but nobody talked to each other. And for me, it seemed a little weird. And I don't know, maybe it was those students, but I'm a really sociable guy. At least I like to think I am. And it drove me nuts that we would see each other, and all we did was just go, and then we're at our task. And so at that point, I realized that this is, I like reading about astronomical research and things like that. I had no interest in doing it. And already at that point, I realized if this is going to be my career, I don't want any part of it. And so I don't know, maybe the lack of interest led to poor grades, or poor grades led to lack of interest. But in any case, there was signs already from that internship. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is the best way for any student to kind of get a feel for what your future is going to be in a particular discipline or major that you're in is to do internships, because they will very quickly show you, right? I mean, you're doing in the internship what you will be doing for, years, decades at a time in your career. And so I realized then that that was not what I wanted to do. Then when I was in graduate school, I did an internship with the US State Department, where I was assigned to the Consulate General in Guangzhou, China, which also goes by the name of Canton. And so that was the summer of '98, and I rotated through all the various departments of the consulate. We did visas, immigrant visas, student visas. I did fraud investigations. So, I went out with State Department officers to interview people to determine if their applications were fraudulent or not. I was involved in hosting these Department of Commerce fairs to basically promote American products in China. But the highlight of it all was that was the summer that President Clinton went on his East Asia trip, and he spent 5 days in China, for which he spent 1 day in Guilin, which is sort of like the Yosemite or Yellowstone of China. And the consulate that I worked out of was responsible for that one. It's actually less than a day. He was only there for about 9 hours, but we prepped for a month and a half for that one, half day that the president was going to be there. And so going back to my original point about internships, giving you an idea of what your career might be, I fell in love with that State Department internship, the activity, it's just government diplomacy, working with your foreign Chinese counterparts. It was life-changing for me. And then I came back and I took the Foreign Service Officer exam, and I promptly failed it. But I didn't fail it because I didn't know. Actually, I failed it because let's not talk about failure. But what it did though was it led me, interestingly enough, to a recruiter in another department of the federal government. And then of course I pursued that for a little bit, and then I realized I wanted to go back to graduate school, and teaching was my final calling. And so when I went back to graduate school, I was a teaching assistant, and that's when I realized this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I think internships gives you that clarity of what you may encounter, and give you an opportunity to take that off ramp or stay on the interstate.
Ryan, do you want to go?
Sure. First of all, wow, Pac, you've lived like 10 different lives, man. I feel like you need a made-for-TV movie about the life and adventures of Pac Tang. Anyway, yeah, I haven't done anything that exciting, but I definitely share Pac's enthusiasm for internships and part-time work in fields that interest you. And I think it often, reality kind of, shows you things that you may not have realized, opens doors and closes others. And for me, it was a bit of both. So my first internship was it was called Western Services Association of or Family Services Association of Western Riverside County, but it was kind of a subsidiary of through the foster care system that provided kind of counseling services. And so I worked with abused children, and I thought that was something, it's amazing and meaningful. And I honestly wish maybe I was stronger then, but it really blew me away, the tragedy of it all and the need. And I was back and forth. I was right on the fence. It was so impactful that I wanted to then pursue that and maybe go on in counseling or, become a MFT or something. But yeah, and then I also started substitute teaching at that period, and realized I really liked teaching, and I mean maybe selfishly enjoyed the teaching more, and I thought both were meaningful. but also realized that teaching K through 12 probably wasn't the best thing for me. I enjoyed it, and I even think now I probably could have had fun and done reasonably well, but I enjoyed, the older students and long-term stuff. And then the community college kind of popped into my head, maybe try teaching there. But along the way, I did other short internships with different nonprofits and think tanks, and mostly did writing, like on policy and issues. And I still do a bit of that work. So that kind of stayed with me, and realized I do have an interest in, in writing and doing sort of academic work in those ways. But yeah, so I think just plugging yourself into as many opportunities as they come up that interest you during your college career. My advice, like probably PAX, is just do it. And, you may be drawn into things you'd never even thought interested you, right? You're like, well, I've never thought of working in a lab or something, but maybe you start that and this is mind blowing. I think for me, it was sort of the other way. The more lab work I did, I was like, I need to be out. I need to be out with people, with groups of people. And like PAC, I think I'm a pretty social person. And so even the one-on-one stuff in counseling was very meaningful. And again, like I said, I wish I sort of had maybe the fortitude for it then, and maybe do now. But at the time, I was like, that's not where I'm going to be. So those, I did a few other things, like part-time jobs and things that also helped kind of hone in on what I ended up doing, which is teaching. So that's that. And it's interesting because then I still return to some of those things. So I work with the ethics committee here at Chafee, and I had done sort of a project with hospital ethics committees. So ethics committees, bioethics committees at hospitals, and that I'm kind of coming back to again now 20 something years later. And so it's one thing that you may sort of open doors that then close because you move on, but that world and those communities, and you may return to that stuff. So I would say, definitely open as many doors for yourself as possible. Close the ones you have to, whether it's time, circumstance, or just interest. But yeah, I mean, I would say cast a wide net. Don't limit things until you have to. All right.
Yeah, so similar to PAC and Ryan, I also kind of, dabbled in a lot of different things. I also, like PAC, realized what I didn't want to do through an internship. My cousin was an attorney, or she is an attorney. So I actually interned at her firm for one summer in Chicago, and I hated it. I just dreaded going to work every day because it was so boring, and I'm like, this is not what I want to do. I mean, I like the research aspect of it and I like the writing aspect of it, but it just felt too dry, and the work did not seem interesting to me because she was in corporate law, and you think lawyers get to be in trial and make all these glamorous cases, and 99% of her job was 80 hours in the week doing billable hours, and I'm like, that's not what I want to do. So basically I went to undergrad at UCI. I was part of this really amazing program. When you guys transfer, I highly recommend you guys do this in addition to the honors program. Shameless plug. I was part of this program called the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. And so basically they gave you money to do research. And I'm like, I get money to do research? That's amazing, right? So I did that 2 years in a row. And then they have a conference at the end, and I got to present my research. And then it was just so incredible. And that was actually what made me want to pursue being a professor, because I'm like, this is amazing. I could do this for work. So I went to grad school, and I did my PhD at UC Irvine, and all of the professors just nail into your head that teaching doesn't matter. And I don't know if this was the case for you, PAC and Ryan, but I remember one of my professors, who I will not name, but she made me cry because she brought me into her office and she's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know, I really like teaching. And she's like, teaching's a waste of time. Focus all your energy on publishing. There's no point in teaching. And me, being the rebellious teenager at age 24, decided, well, no, I'm going to go teach. So I basically said, screw you, I don't need you as an advisor, and found a new advisor that was much more supportive. I RA'd I was his research assistant for a period, and then I also TA'd, which was pretty cool because you get that teaching experience, but they also pay for your tuition. So that was awesome. And then I ended up at Chafee, and it all just kind of fit together. So good stuff.
Thank you. So my last question is, can you discuss a few career paths that a student might not know about that are connected to your major? So we all know that you can become a professor in philosophy or political science or sociology. What are some other career paths that are out there for students?
Well, you don't major in political science to become a politician. So if you've noticed, all our senators and elected officials, they come from a variety of fields out there. They're engineers, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're farmers, but you don't. The bottom line is you don't major in poli-sci to be a politician, but you very much can be in politics, right? And so at least with political science, I think so a student who's majoring in political science at some point will decide whether or not you want to end up in a career in the public sector or the private sector. And even within the public sector, you could look at the public sector that is governmental or the non-governmental part of the public sector. So what I mean by that is when we talk about governmental part of the public sector, I'm talking about government, literally government, right? You work in local, city, or municipal government positions, city hall, the county board of supervisors, the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? All those are government positions. Then there are state positions and federal, national positions, but mostly they're you're working as a writer, researcher for, some as an aide to some politician or some public policy maker. But then there's the non-governmental part of the public sector side, and we're talking about civics groups. For me, it would be the more meaningful side. Not that the government side is less meaningful, but I think government tends to work for those who are resourceful and powerful, and it's those without resources and without a voice that I think, at least for myself personally, I think advocacy for them is more meaningful. And so what I'm talking about is advocacy groups that work to give a voice to the homeless, to children, women, the poor, animal rights activism, environmental protection. So you would, again, be a researcher, writer, or a lobbyist to promote those areas and interests in government. And then, of course, there's the private sector where you could be working as a researcher in a consulting firm, international finance, international banking, or you could be a strategist for a multinational corporation, right? And advocate or lobby for business interests in government. And of course, political science is also known as the gateway program or gateway major that leads into the legal profession and law school and to become a lawyer. But pretty much everything is possible. I would always advocate that if you want to do more of the political stuff, you should consider an advanced degree to major, get a master's or a higher degree. But with a bachelor's degree, baccalaureate degree, you can do pretty much everything in government and around government, anything that deals with policy making.
Should I go next? Can I share my screen? Because I made a PowerPoint, I'm sorry.
Overachiever.
I know, it's because I'm Asian. Sorry, that's pretty racist. I shouldn't say that. Is it? I don't know. Anyway, so.
But it makes me the bad Asian.
Well, yeah, you're an Asian failure. We have already established this. I'm just kidding. All right, so I love this quote. I recently read Michelle Obama's Becoming, who was also a sociology major, and she says, I was a sociology major and had nothing to do necessarily with law, which is ultimately I went to law school, but what I tried to do was choose something that I was passionate about or something I cared about. And the reason this rang true with me is because I think most of us ended up in our major because it felt right. It felt like we were doing what we were, I don't want to sound not created for, but necessarily like it's just something that we felt fueled by, I guess. And I think this is what Michelle Obama is talking about in her book as well. Like sociology was not something she thought she was setting out to do, and neither was law school. It was just something that felt right to her. And this is what I urge students to do as well. Look for something that feels like it can hold your passion for at least 10 years. So a lot of people don't even realize what sociology is. I certainly didn't. All sociology is a study of groups of people. We study social patterns, social issues. One of the key components in sociology, especially post 1970 sociology, is really studying power and authority and how that power and authority is challenged with social change. So as sociology majors, we teach lots of things, but aside from studying like Durkheim and Marx and Mills, we kind of teach these broader skills that I think philosophy and political science also teach, things like research, critical thinking, expository reading and writing, data analysis. One thing I really like about sociology is you kind of automatically gain empathy because you're constantly learning about people who don't have as much power or privileges or resources in society. You also learn presentation skills, at least in most of our classes, right, where you're presenting the information. And you also understand how organizations are structured. So these are all kind of random skills that you essentially apply to the workforce. So a lot of times, depending on what you specialize within sociology, this will open up your career path. At Chafee, most of our classes are in those lower division general ed classes, but once you transfer, there are tons of other classes in the upper division that are specialty classes. So things like business and sociology, sociology of education, sociology of medicine, sociology of the law, sociology of families, immigration, media, gender, et cetera, et cetera. So I did a little bit of research, and these are job titles for sociology majors. And this was put out by the University of Notre Dame. And as you can see, like if you specialize in business and sociology, these are just some of the types of job titles that they found. Things like a human resources manager, a market analyst, a technical writer. If you're into government, then you're going to look at being at like a foreign service officer or human rights officer. And obviously, like criminal justice, you have like correctional counselors, corrections officer. Research is one area like I'm really passionate about. Quite a few of my friends went on after grad school to go work for the census. So they actually do things like analyzing the surveys that census gets in to see if there's inequalities in society and what policies are remedying a lot of those inequalities. And I can make this available for any of you who would like to have access to it. Just email me. I'll throw my email in the chat room when we're done. And then the last thing I did was I just kind of looked at some of the top typical career paths for sociology majors. No surprise, one of the big ones that came up was social workers. And as you can see, there aren't, typically with sociology majors, most of the like specialty jobs require higher education. So getting that master's degree, going to law school for a JD. And this is the average starting salary. So typically anywhere between like 50 to 72,000 annually. And that's all I have prepared. So one of my favorite quotes is Nelson Mandela's, which is that education is the most powerful tool to change the world, or a weapon. So sorry, that was really fast, but I'll send it to you if you have any questions. If you want it, just email me.
Brian, please tell me you did not put together a PowerPoint also.
Yeah, I have 10 slides actually, so no, not at all. Thanks, Julie. I'm known for that though, right? It seems like I usually over prepare for these things.
Yeah, where's your PowerPoint? I totally thought you were going to do it, which is why I did it.
I started. That's funny. Anyway, we're not going there. I'll make mine brief, but I think, again, there's a lot of overlap. In fact, I was going to address some of just the skills like Julie mentioned about critical thinking and argument analysis and speech writing and giving speeches. You see a lot of speech writers with degrees in philosophy because I think you learn critical thinking and arts of persuasion and, that sort of thing. What I'm seeing more and more of, and this kind of gets to one of Julie's middle slides, is this issue of specialization, where there are so many graduate programs that are in a subfield in philosophy. So it's not just philosophy and then you would specialize. It's literally a degree in ethics or social justice, or some area in applied ethics, even bioethics or something. And so I'm seeing more and more of those types of programs. And in general, philosophy is sort of maybe I'm saying this selfishly, but the foundation for all of the disciplines. It's historically that way, and it seems now that the specializations are reemerging. You can go and study philosophy of physics, philosophy of biology, philosophy of sociology, philosophy of education. And so if the theoretical underpinnings and kind of foundations of different disciplines interest you, you can get into that area of study. And again, those are more academic. That would be more like you're becoming a professor or some sort of analyst. in those areas. Law is another common path. Philosophy, usually the number one or number two performing undergraduate major for the LSATs and for law school overall. So one of my Poli-Sci friends always says, whenever someone says they want to major in Poli-Sci to go into law school, he says, don't major in philosophy. You'll do better, you'll get into better schools, et cetera. So sorry, Pac, I'm stealing your thunder there. But you get a lot of that. And then the nonprofit sector, I mentioned that there are so many programs. I mean, I was just thinking of a program at USC, I think it's called social ethics, but it really is more preparing you to work in NGOs and nonprofits and work with, you know, even international aid groups and the UN and different charities. And that's becoming a very dominant field in philosophy and probably the largest area in ethics. So you can actually get training that's inter or transdisciplinary, where you get the, you know, the education in ethics and learning about social justice and human and civil rights and all of those issues. And then, you know, coursework in how to start and run a nonprofit, how to, you know, do that sort of stuff. So speech writing, I mentioned, working for think tanks and policy groups. I have many. I was just looking at kind of my friends from grad school list in my head, and I think several of them went into nonprofits, several went into writing for think tanks or on their own. Yeah, several work in the government. So I think, like other disciplines in the humanities and social sciences, it prepares you for a variety of fields. And it's increasingly the case that you actually study those specific fields when you get to grad school. So you could actually study bioethics specifically because you know you want to work with hospitals or whatever. One of the biggest emerging fields is in automation and artificial intelligence. And so more and more, I have colleagues at Caltech and MIT, and in the work groups that are dealing with artificial intelligence, especially artificial general intelligence, there's always philosophers. So you sort of have neuroscientists, roboticists, often physicists and philosophers. So that's one area where philosophy is merging with tech. I could say a lot more, but that's probably good for now.
All right, thank you, everyone. I wanted to open up the floor to students. So if you have any questions, you can either type them into the chat box or you can unmute yourself. Any questions you have for our panelists or myself, we'd be happy to answer them. Everybody's shy? Don't worry. You can ask any kind of questions. We're all here for you. We have a question. If you hadn't become a professor, what would you be doing? Is this directed to everybody, or was there a particular professor that you wanted to answer? Everyone. Okay.
I can answer really briefly. I think I'd be working in the nonprofit world on some issues in global justice. There's a few that I do a little bit of, I guess, work with now or advocacy for, and that makes sense to me. I mean, I think especially my training in ethics and writing sort of background, there's a lot of opportunity there, and probably more importantly, a lot of need there. So the one big movement's called effective altruism. I would just recommend it if you want to Google the term for the day. And there's a few groups. One's called GiveWell. In my view, they're probably one of the best nonprofits. They use sort of data analysis and a few other modes of investigation to find what types of aid are the most effective in doing the most good. And so that whole movement, I think, is phenomenal. And there are tons of individual charities, and then the GiveWell and effective altruism as an organization. So that kind of stuff, I think, appeals to me the most now. And that's it.
Julie, you want to go ahead first, or?
I'm still thinking. Do you mind going first?
No, not a problem. Once I started teaching, got my first taste of teaching, I just couldn't think of doing anything else. And of course, throughout my life, I should say throughout my adult life, since I left home and went to college, there were signs that I should be involved in teaching. The first one was actually my mother. She was taking a math class at a local community college, and she asked me for help with her math homework. And then about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes into it, my mother said that, have you ever thought about teaching? And at that point, I was still an astrophysics major. And I said, oh, no, I didn't tell her I didn't know what the hell I was going to do, but I didn't think anything about teaching. And I said, why would you just out of the blue say that? And she said, well, I've asked your two sisters to help me, and they're both terrible. And one gets mad at me, and the other one's just impatient, and they wouldn't get mad at me, but would just find a reason to do something else and say she had to go, right? And then the second big hint to me about teaching was when I was in my internship with the State Department. At the end, so the interns always met with the #2 person at the consulate for a Sunday lunch, and he would check in on all the interns. And so in the final meeting, final lunch before we all went back to our respective lives back in the United States, we went through around the table, like, what did you get out of this? And what would you like to do? And I said, I would like to be a Foreign Service officer. I love this internship so much. And then he said, Pack, don't. And that was, it was a harsh slap. I thought he was joking at first. And then, Melvin, he's not known to be a jokester. So he had a very dry sense of humor. And then I realized he was serious, right? Like he said, no, you'd be a terrible Foreign Service officer, but I think you'd be a great teacher. And, you have the time and the patience and a way of explaining things. And so at that point, I felt a little bit embarrassed sitting, being told no in front of everyone around the table. And then it wasn't until I got back and started teaching as a teaching assistant that I realized that's really what I want to do. I know that's kind of the long way about answering a question, because I'm not sure I know what I would be doing if it wasn't teaching. If it's not teaching at the collegiate level, maybe I'd be teaching at the high school level, but I would be doing some form of teaching. I mean, while I was in graduate school, I was hired to be a China leadership analyst for the CIA. And in one sense, I'm glad I didn't take that job. It's in hindsight, right now that I'm in the final third of my life, I think, and or entering that. In hindsight, I really don't know actually what I would be doing if I wasn't teaching, but I think I would be teaching in some level or some manner.
Now that our dean has left, I can be honest. No, I'm kidding. I think I'm similar to Pac, and part of the reason I made you go first is because I have no idea, because I just genuinely like what I do. Love some days, like most days. And I think about why I like it so much. And so much of it is because I get in a state of flow, not to jump into pop psychology references, but flow is this state where you lose track of time. And I find myself in that state when I'm with students, when I'm working with students, and also when I'm researching and writing. So if I had to not teach, if if I had my vocal cords cut out again, then maybe research and write. Right. But I think for the most part, it's teaching that's always kind of been it, and thinking and writing and reading. I always say we have the best job in the world. We get paid to do something we enjoy doing. And yeah, so I feel very lucky. So, yeah.
I think I can speak for all three of us, or all four of us here, that we're in this field, we're in our respective fields because we obviously have a passion and a love for it. And I think we're all in teaching simply because we want to open those doors to, in essence, right? I mean, if I saw a movie that I really liked, I'd be sharing that with my family and friends. If I ate at a restaurant that I really enjoyed, I would share that revelation with them as well. And so for me, international relations and politics, that's what I enjoy this. I eat this up, and so I go into the classroom, and I think we all do, trying to see whom else that we could, share and spark that passion and get them into, our side, right? Not philosophy. Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions before we head out?
Yes, I actually have a question for Professor Tang. Pardon me if your first name or that's your last name. But do you really not regret working for the federal government? Like, you would have made so much more money.
You'd be surprised how little you get paid for the federal government, actually. I mean, if you're working in the civil service, the pay is, I mean, there's actually, it's known, it's it's the government pay scale, and there's an official term for it, and it's all there. When I was hired by the CIA, my starting pay, and they gave me two bump ups or additions to it because I had language and area specialization, and it was only $38,000. So there's a reason why I think some CIA agents sell out, their country and their people, and sell out state secrets, because the pay is just ridiculously low for what we're doing. And of course, it should also make us all wonder why that type of criminality isn't discovered sooner. I mean, if you've got a government job, why would you have a Ferrari and two Lamborghinis, in the garage? But would I tend to enjoy pretty much everything that I get involved in, so I probably would have enjoyed it. But I just think working with students and mentoring students, and then of course seeing them move on, and then occasionally a few of them will email me back with their success stories, and this is what I've been doing lately, and I go, wow, this is fantastic. And I'm glad that for a small part of your life, I was a contributor to, and facilitated that. So, I mean, would I have hated it? I don't think I would have hated it. I would have hated the DC weather in the wintertime. But no, I'm pretty happy where I'm at. Thank you, Omar. And Tang is my last name. You got it right.
Anyone else?
Actually, I have one more question for the other two professors. Since we have so much diversity within like your professions, do you think that's bad for what the future is to come? Like, why can't we just focus on one specific thing? Like, if it's sociology, just focus on only sociology. And if it's philosophy, why not just go straight to like philosophy? Like, maybe I'm getting the wrong idea because I'm only thinking like of Greek people for philosophy.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. In fact, and there is a debate in the discipline over kind of whether this hyper specialization is kind of watering down the discipline or stretching it really thin or something. So I think that's a fair question. My own view is that it's an asset, right? Just kind of like diversity in any area of study, I think is a good thing. So I think having philosophers that focus on hundreds of different issues across the different areas of philosophy. And so, yeah, like you said, you're thinking of ancient Greek philosophy or something, and that is one birthplace of one strand of philosophy, right? Let's say in Western Civ or something like that. But yeah, new issues emerge, right? So in the 21st century, I mean, I think there's so many more new and interesting questions that are coming up that need to be tackled philosophically. So the fact that artificial intelligence and many huge advances have occurred in our lifetime and will likely shape our lifetimes in ways that we really can't even fathom. Like, we need to think about that and think seriously about that. And I think philosophy has the toolkit to do so. And it would be a shame if we didn't jump in, right? So yeah, I mean, I think disciplines need to be alive and they need to be dynamic, right? And so when new issues emerge and questions emerge, and so, thinking about them philosophically, from my perspective, is always essential. And so I would be sad if we only looked at, dead people's ideas, and especially just the Western canon or something, right? I mean, there's so much great indigenous philosophy that's emerging really right now. I mean, it's been around forever, but I mean, in the academic discourse, that's, really pushing boundaries, which is awesome. Same thing across, international philosophical sort of world. So from my perspective, the more the merrier, the bigger the party, the better, the wider the net, the better. I don't think there's a problem of sort of watering it down or losing focus or something. I think philosophy, more than a subject matter, is both a way of life and a set of tools to look at the world and analyze it critically and rationally, and look for evidence, and be open to change. And I think those skills can and should be applied to anything that interests us. And that's great that philosophy is evolving in those ways, and now there are subfields that you can specialize in. So I think it's all a good thing. But I do understand your question, though, that it does get so diverse that I've had students who've gone on and got PhDs in philosophy, and we don't speak the same language anymore, right? They're so specialized in one area of philosophy. But ultimately, I think that's a beautiful thing.
If I could piggyback off of that too. So what he's mentioning is that, there are different concepts and ideas that are constantly changing and coming up. Additionally, there are brand new jobs. I mean, he mentioned the AI and things like that. So ultimately, when you're studying in a particular field, you're learning about a theoretical framework. And then that knowledge that you have can allow you to apply that to jobs that exist today or jobs that haven't even been created yet. So I think that's kind of a powerful way of thinking about it too, that you have this knowledge and this skill set that you're then able to apply to different areas. And that's an asset to you, and that's an asset to your employer.
And one more thing I wanted to add is a lot of these subfields are ways that voices that were completely neglected historically, this is the way for them to emerge and have their own discipline. So when I was at UC Irvine, there was a huge kind of controversy because I specialized in immigration, and then my subspecialty was Asian American studies. And I remember sociology wanted to basically subsume Asian American studies. They wanted to do away with the Asian American studies department because they're like, why do we need a separate department for Asian American studies? They could just fall under immigration and sociology. But it's different, right? Because I think when you take away these subtleties, you're basically erasing a whole set of narratives that don't get voice in the discipline otherwise. Asian American studies and Latinx studies and African American studies and all of these, various ethnic studies departments emerged simply because these mainstream disciplines like sociology, philosophy, political science, they were, obviously things are changing now, but historically they were built on the stories of privileged white males. And this was a way to include their voices into the story. So I think, like Ryan and Allison are saying, it's an incredible asset to have these specialties and these sub classifications. So we have other voices out there.
And if I could also add, I think another perspective also is that I think it shows your observation that there are so many specializations, I think shows how multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary our modern life and our modern reality really is. So, I mean, for example, when Professor Song had her chart of possible careers in a sociology major, I looked at it, I'm like, well, hell, she just ripped off the list for political science, and she just, deleted political science and stuck sociology onto it, right? But I think at the end of the day, I felt
the same way. Just so you know, I think we're on the same. I'm like, this is the philosophy chart. What is she?
Whatever, slackers. I had the PowerPoint, so settle down.
All right, you win.
But I think for any modern industry that we may find ourselves working in, you could have a different perspective, a sociological perspective, a political science perspective, or philosophy or anthropological perspective. It just shows how knowledge is not all that compartmentalized, but in fact, actually, we only compartmentalize it so that we could bite off a piece that we could actually chew. Otherwise, knowledge, right, is just so grand and so big that no single discipline can handle it, I think. And I think that's why we see all that specialization.
Okay, I had one last question from a student, if you all have time for it. So our last question will be, are there any stereotypes about your major that you disagree with?
Actually, there's a lot that I agree with. Many of them were told to me by various philosophy faculty in my career about, career opportunities and things, right? That whatever, I'm not going to make any jokes about career path at this point. But the one that there is some truth to, but also I disagree with because of what we just were saying about the emerging subfields and all that. And I think Dr. Song said it well. There's a stereotype about a lot of areas of academia and maybe even philosophy first and foremost, that you study old dead white guys either from ancient Greece or maybe up until the Enlightenment, but that it's sort of a dead field in that way. And again, the truth of it is there's still a lot of that, right? A lot of programs, you study these figures in the canon of Western philosophy. But thankfully, new voices are emerging. And I think Julie did justice to that sort of dynamic very well. And I think in philosophy, it's exploding right now. And a lot of these, intercultural, international perspectives are now really penetrating institutions in America. So I do think that there is a stereotype. There's the truth of the stereotype based on the history of Western philosophy, but I think in the last 100 years, and especially really in our lifetimes, I mean, the last 30, 40, 50 years, that's changing. So there's one, there's a few others, but that's the one that I think is probably most relevant.
My favorite is that sociology is socialism. And I hear this a lot where my students assume that we're in this class to learn about socialism and I'm here to brainwash them into socialists. Which, fine, we can do some of that, but that's not my main purpose. But I always think that's so funny. I think it's just because it's a similar label. Maybe that's why they embrace that. But yeah, that's definitely not true. I know tons of very capitalist sociologists out there.
I'll piggyback really quickly. I think a lot of people think philosophy is psychology. I get this all the time, but more like at a dinner party, right? You're out somewhere like, oh, you teach philosophy, so you like study people's minds or whatever. Like, sure. I mean, there's a philosophy of mind, but I think that's what they think. And it's just maybe the terminology and the lack of awareness of the different disciplines. But I get that all the time. Anyway, yeah, like, are you like analyzing me right now? I'm like, I'm not a therapist, man. All right. But yes, I am analyzing it, but not in the way you think.
Oh, man. That's similar to the when I was an astrophysics major. It's like, oh, so I'm a Capricorn. What are you? I'm like, no, that's not astronomy. That's not astronomy. But with regards to political science, I think the number one misconception about the major is that the only job is politics. And that's furthest from the truth. It's a liberal arts major, and like any other major in social behavioral sciences, the liberal arts, it gives you the skills that you need to be a productive member of society: research skills, writing skills, and presentation skills. And you can apply that pretty much in all fields. Now, of course, if you major in political science, then you're more likely to apply those skills in the area of policymaking, politics, and advocacy. But I would say that that's the number one stereotype, is that somehow you're going to be a politician if you major in political science, or you have to be dealing in politics. But the reality is not. It's the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do with it.
All right. So thank you so much to all of our panel and all the students that have showed up. I hope that you can think about a lot of this and, have learned a lot from this experience. There's another panel that'll start at 3 p.m. that I'll be hosting. Professor Tang will be back, but then we'll have a couple of other panelists from different fields. So again, you're more than welcome to join that 3 p.m. panel as well. I will send this recording to, the panel professors, but I'll also add it to a Canvas shell and show them where that link is so that we can share this with you if you missed the first 15 minutes or if you want to review it again. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for serving with us, panelists.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.